Hey guys, welcome back to the Beyond the Game podcast. My name is Jess Crowe and I'm joined here today by Olympic gymnast Sam Oldham. Sam, thank you so much for joining me here on the pod. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Jess. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to having a conversation and talking all things Olympics, gymnastics, and sport, I guess.
Excellent. You've got the right idea. Today we're going to be speaking about your entire career from start to finish and what that looked like outside of gymnastics as well. But firstly, take me right back to the beginning. How much of an involvement did sport have in your childhood?
Sport was massive for me, so I think my earliest memories are probably watching the 1998 World Cup final. And I think what I remember most about that was just my dad. And then a year later, we're all Manchester United fans, so we watched United win the treble. And I don't think I've ever seen my dad that happy again since. And that really stuck with me. My family are all sports people, particularly on my dad's side. So my granddad, well, my great granddad actually was a football player. My granddad was a football player. My dad was. Me and my brothers played. So sport was definitely a big part of my childhood. Gymnastics was very left field. My mum had done it a little bit when she was a kid, I'm told. So I think she claims that my gymnastics prowess came from her. But sport was a massive part of my childhood.
Of course. You mentioned football being a big part there. I hear you're quite the talented footballer back in the day. I can't speak too much on the current day. But where did that love for football begin?
I think it was just the family background. I remember my first game. I was 4, maybe, or 5. I had to play a year up because the teams didn't start that young. Maybe I was in reception at school, and much to my dad's disappointment, I picked the ball up and ran with it and just threw it in the goal. I think I'd watched rugby on the TV that weekend, but I loved it straight away. It was, for me, football was always it was a very different challenge and certainly a different approach and mindset for me, like playing football. I could play football all day long and just have so much fun and never get tired. Gymnastics was a different kind of animal. It was very much it was certainly the difference between a team sport and an individual sport. And the approach and the mindset for that was really, really, it was more about the internal battle and challenge for me doing gymnastics, whereas football was very much more about just love and enjoyment. And like I said, I could have played all day long and never got tired, whereas gymnastics was a very different thing.
So when was gymnastics first introduced to you then?
So it was actually a school teacher. So I was getting into quite a lot of trouble when I was a kid, mainly because I just couldn't sit still. I was diagnosed at 30 with childhood ADHD. That wasn't diagnosed back then. I was just kind of the naughty kid. And a school teacher suggested to my mum, you should take Sam to the local gymnastics club. So back in the year 2000, when I started gymnastics, it wasn't very popular for boys to do gymnastics at all. So my first class was just in a village hall. It was me, 15 girls. And I just loved it because nobody kind of told me off for channeling that energy into something. And I just responded really well to the sport straight away. And then I joined the school club at my primary school that again was just girls, but they had a competition coming up. I went to do this competition for my school. I won it. There was only one boy. It was just me, but a lady was watching, and she said to my dad, "Where does Sam do gymnastics? Because we think he's pretty talented." And I went to the Notts Gymnastics Academy for a trial, and that's kind of where it started then.
And speaking about that sort of the element of team sport and football, where they're making the shift into the very individual sport that is gymnastics, how did you find and cope with that really heavy individuality in gymnastics?
To be honest, I responded to it really, really well. And I think it was mainly the structure and the discipline. At that time in my life, I've got a younger brother and 2 younger sisters. There were 3 of us. And my dad was working crazy hours trying to start his own business at the time. So he just wasn't around that much because he was trying to financially support the family. So I think I lacked that structured discipline and almost not that my dad wasn't a father figure, he was. It was just that it was very challenging for my mom to manage 2 boys, a baby that was in my younger sister, all at once on her own. And I had so much energy. I was wild. So that structure of being in in a group of 10, 15 boys, most of which were all of the kids in their class at school that couldn't sit still. You just put them all together and have a very traditional kind of disciplinarian type coach. I just responded to that very well. And it actually, what it did was calm me right down. And I started to do much better at school as well. Started to be able to concentrate a little bit more, be more disciplined, follow instructions a lot better. And I just responded really well to it. I think I probably have quite a unique set of chemicals in my brain, because at 30 I was diagnosed with ADHD, but also obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So the fact that I was doing a sport where the objective was to be perfect, I responded really well to that because it was really clear. There were like clear boundaries. It was all about numbers, and that was great for me. Things like English at school were really tough. I found that really hard, but I was really good at maths. So for me, it became like a maths game. It was very logical. It was like, right, if this kid does 10, I'll do 11. And if I keep doing 11, I'm going to beat him really quickly. And I really liked that about gymnastics. So yeah, for me, it was all about that kind of internal battle and channeling that energy into something. And I was very lucky. So I joined the Notts Gymnastics Academy in the year 2000. And in 2001, one of the best coaches in the world just happened to come to Nottingham. And that gymnastics club is today probably the best facility in the whole country. And it was back then. And it's only 10 minutes from where I live. So a lot of it was just pure luck of being in the right place at the right time and the stars aligning. And that kind of, yeah, set me off on my career.
Excellent. And I think a lot of what you've just spoken about there, it has a big sentimental value, gymnastics. I can speak for myself as a kid, that waking up really early before school and trying to learn that back walkover with dad and that sort of thing, that's the grassroots of gymnastics for a lot of gymnasts. Do you resonate with that? And what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? So like even now, you talked about my football. I still try to play Saturday football, somewot unsuccessfully. I'm like always getting injured. Which is more I think my personality. I'm like very accident prone. I've got a 2 year old boy, and it seems like he's taken after his dad. So when I go there and I train, whenever I see the young girls teams, they're just all doing cartwheels. Like
That was me.
gymnastics is like the first sport that you do. You don't really need any equipment. You start to learn to jump and stretch and put your hands down and walk around, do bunny hops. Like every human starts to learn to move in that way, and that is fundamentally just gymnastics. So for me, I can't say that I specifically remember doing gymnastics moves. What I do remember doing though, because we have an old VHS tape of me and my little brother, would be that I'd always dress up as like the goody. So I'd be Peter Pan and he'd be Captain Hook, and I'd just be running around like flipping upside down on the grass, not knowing that I was doing gymnastics, but I think I had somewhat of like a sense of spatial awareness probably before I started the sport. And I certainly had like the family background in gymnastics. And the big thing that I think I had was, if I'm honest, was they say that farmer strength is a real thing. I've got a family background in farming. So my granddad was one of 5 boys and a sister, and his dad owned all the farms in the area that we live. And he was also a stoker in the Navy in World War One. So basically, for 12 hours a day, shift on, shift off, he would just shovel coal in the warships in World War One. And one thing I am incredibly good at is just outworking everybody. And I think a lot of that is probably genetic and partly like my mindset. But that became a real strength for me. So yeah, one thing I can say is there was just like an inner determination in me, just from as long as I can remember, that no one ever had to kind of motivate me. There was no coach ever having to push me. My dad, I didn't need that. Like I was the kid that if you leave me in the gym by myself, I'll work just as hard on my own. It was an inner drive and determination, I think, to be something, to prove something. I don't know what that is, but I've always had that in me from a very young age.
That's really interesting that you spoke about that spatial awareness that you had from a young age as well, and sort of the fact that you think gymnastics helped develop that. I think a lot of gymnasts, Noel Wilson especially sticks out to me there, who speaks a lot on the importance of having children involved in gymnastics from a young age and sort of the benefits of that. You say you've got a little one yourself now. What benefits do you see from gymnastics of kids getting involved at such a young age?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a good point. And Niall's doing a really, really good job of, opening gymnastics clubs all over the country. And for me, it's the best base sport, and I can always tell a kid that's done gymnastics before. And a lot of the work that I do is working in schools, and I coach at the very grassroots level at like 5 years old, teaching them to do their first forward rolls. But the big thing, honestly, is like learning to fall over and bravery. If I go into a school and I try to convince a year 6 pupil to do a forward roll, that's a big ask. But a 4 or 5 year old will just do it. That fear isn't there. And so getting them early is really, really important. You know, that kid that I teach to do a forward roll in year 6, they may never do that again in their lifetime. So I think getting over that fear barrier of going upside down and pushing yourself is really, really important. I think gymnastics does that. In many ways, we've kind of nerfed the world. So kids are so frightened of taking risks, but calculated risks are really important. And a gymnastics setting is a great place to do that. Most of the equipment is soft, there's crash mats, but it's really, really important to learn in life to take risks, especially from a young age. And that was one thing that I'm really grateful for. Like, I was thinking about this in the car last night. My dad, when I think about like my dad and my mom and the way that I was brought up, they always made me feel like I could do anything. Like there was never any kind of discouragement or negativity around things we wanted to try and do. It was always like, yeah, of course you can do that. You can do anything you want to do. If you work hard, you put the work in, like, and that was such a gift that they gave me, because the reality is my dream in many ways was like an impossible dream. The British gymnastics team were ranked 23rd in the world when I watched the Olympics on TV when I was 11. So for me to dream of going to the Olympics and winning a gold medal, like there was no blueprint, nobody had done that. And even for my parents, they might have been like, well, that's not very realistic. Maybe you should think about having a backup plan or focus on your education. There was just never any of that. It was very much like, I still see my dad and my mom look at me today, and I still think like they think I could do anything, which is great. That's such a, I want to impart that on my own little boy. But I do agree that getting kids into gymnastics from a very, very early age is huge. Not, you might want your kid, or your kid might show some talent in another sport. I think everybody should do gymnastics at school, like from the get-go, just as a bare minimum. And you're starting to hear a lot of athletes say that, a lot of professional athletes, particularly athletes in sports like mixed martial arts. But Djokovic was a gymnast before he started tennis. Like, it's much more popular and common within Europe for the kids. It's like fundamental that they all have to do gymnastics at school. And gymnastics is really big in Europe. So I think a lot of it is about that, exploring your body, playing. Play is a huge thing. Sport gets so serious from such a young age, particularly in this country. And I think, in recent weeks, we've had the Winter Olympic Games, and people are looking at the Norwegian system. How do they win the medal table? They only have a population of 5 million. Well, they don't start competing in sports until they're 13. They don't start formal education until they're 7. They're taught to take risks, fail, explore, play. And it gets very serious very quickly in sport in this country. So, yeah, I think gymnastics is amazing. I'm constantly promoting it within schools. I think I've taught probably upwards of 20,000 kids in the last 3 years to do forward rolls, which is really cool. So, yeah, I'm trying to do that, but I do think it has a place within certainly the whole broader sports network, but within education, just in terms of that bravery, taking risks, and your spatial awareness. I remember when I was about 25, I used to live with my brother and my best friend. And one night, I had my dinner in one hand, I had the remote control in the other hand. I stood on the back of the sofa and pulled the curtains with my teeth shut. And my brother was like, "You do know most people just couldn't do that." And I was like, "Oh yeah." I just take it for granted, but because I did that from such a young age, I have a great idea of like where my body is in space and time. It's helped me massively in my life.
No, I can absolutely agree with that 100% there. Maybe not drawing the curtain straight with my teeth, but those kind of skills definitely do come from gymnastics, as you say. But speaking about sort of taking the sport more seriously, then what was that pivotal, or was there a pivotal moment in your career in gymnastics where you realised that you could make a professional career out of this, let alone go on and compete in the Olympics?
Yeah, I think when I was 12 years old, I moved to secondary school. I got asked to represent Great Britain for the first time. I went to Austria to compete in a competition called the Future Cup. And the interesting thing about this story is that I went out there to compete for Great Britain, and Max Whitlock had relocated to compete for Slovenia. So he'd left home at the age of 12. For 6 months, he lived with his coach, without his family, educated there. So that tells you what kind of mindset he had at the age of 12. And he competed for Slovenia, and I competed for Great Britain. It was really weird. And I did very well in that competition. I won it. I came joint first with a Japanese gymnast. And I think that was the moment when I won that gold medal for Great Britain. They played the national anthem, and it just coincided with the bid for London 2012. It all just seemed like this is it. Like this could actually happen. I could make it to an Olympics. It's going to be an Olympics potentially in my home country. All of a sudden, funding was being spoken about because at that time we'd lost all of our funding. So my parents had to pay for me to go and train at the National Centre in Liverpool at that time. And all of the senior gymnasts, a lot of them had full-time jobs. It was like a hobby at that time. It really wasn't a profession. But that just, at the perfect, everything just coincided. We had a very, very talented generation of kids. There were like maybe 10 of us that just happened to be on this team at that time that all went on to win Olympic medals. So I think it was just a combination of a lot of different things coinciding at the right time. And that's when it became quite serious. And that was at the point I needed to make the decision between gymnastics and football, because I was on a 4-year contract at the time at Notts County. So I was guaranteed to be there until I was 16, which is most kids in this country's dream, right? But it was getting a bit too much. I was training. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning and go to the gym. I'd be at school all day. I'd train all evening. I'd do basically 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then after gymnastics on a Wednesday and a Friday, I'd train for football, and my day off from gymnastics on a Sunday was a match day. And it was just mental. So trying to do that as a kid was getting a bit too much. You know, there was a lot of like 10 p.m. I need to do my homework for school tomorrow, crying my eyes out, my dad trying to help me. And we just decided it was time to make a decision. If I could have carried on doing both forever, I probably would have. But yeah, at that point, I decided that gymnastics was what I wanted to do. And it wasn't easy. You know, the next day after I made that decision, I had contract offers from Derby, Forest and Leicester through my front door. So it was tough. But I just decided this was it. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to be an Olympic champion. And yeah, my family fully supported me on that decision. And yeah, we kind of then, it was everything going towards London 2012 after that.
Excellent. And then in 2008, 15 years old, competing in those junior championships then, can you take us back to that competition? Obviously, probably one of the first where, as you say, you sort of left football behind and you really then focused on gymnastics. What was that competition like for you, and how did you approach it?
Do you know what? I talked to the other members of that team, and most of us look back and go, that's like the most pressure I ever felt. Because at the time, our national coaches were from Russia. And we were going against Russia, and we'd never beaten Russia before, ever. I think in the build up to that competition is the most amount of routines I'd ever done in training. It was like staggering the amount of routines. The coaches were feeling the pressure and putting the pressure on our shoulders. And it felt like a big moment. We'd had Daniel Keatings at the time, who was already competing as a senior athlete, came back down to the juniors to try and help us try and win this gold medal. And I just remember it being huge, like absolutely monumental. Great Britain had never won a team gold medal at any level ever. Like, so what we were doing really was pretty groundbreaking. And the Russian team was super strong at the time. Now, at that time in my life, I'd actually made the decision to leave home and live with another family down in Huntingdon, where Lewis Smith and Daniel Keatings were training. So I wasn't living with my family at the time. I was living with another family. So I'd put a lot on the line for this. My parents had remortgaged the house. It was the financial crisis, so it was tough. But at this point, I was fully locked in. And I went into that competition and I did incredibly well. I think I finished within the top 8 all around as a 15-year-old against 18-year-olds. On the last event, I actually fractured my wrist. So I broke my wrist, continued to finish my routine on the floor. It felt like my arm was like bowing as I did it. I did my last tumble on one arm, and we did it. We won the gold medal. And after that, everything kind of changed. And Lewis Smith went on to win a bronze medal at the Olympics in Beijing that summer. And that's where people started to really like pay attention to what we were doing in Great Britain. And yeah, from that moment, it was, to win an individual medal is an amazing achievement, but to win a team medal, it's a different thing. You have to have a very strong program to win with 5 guys or 6 guys, whether that's men's or women's gymnastics. So to have done that, I think, was a massive breakthrough moment. To have beaten Russia, who were like a superpower, from that moment on, it was kind of game on then going into London 2012.
Of course. But then after that time, bringing it back to that sort of individual aspect, you were 17, 18 years old and one of the best junior gymnasts in the world, or at that period of time. But you speak about the pressure that you felt going into that first comp in 2008. Did that pressure remain into that sort of back end of your junior career, and how did you deal with that?
It did remain, but if I'm honest, when I was that age, I was ruthless. I was such a ruthless competitor. I had this like edge about me, particularly when it was time for competition. A lot of people used to describe me as quite intimidating. It's because I didn't know anything else. I was just that way. Like I was brought up in many ways by somebody that didn't quite achieve what they wanted to in football, and a gymnastics coach that didn't make it to the Olympic Games in gymnastics. So they were vicariously trying to not live their dream through me. They were just frightened of me feeling the pain they felt of not making it to the top. So that bred a very certain type of individual, because they were probably the 2 most influential people in my life at that point. And it just made me ruthlessly competitive. And internally, I was just very, very competitive as well. So that was brilliant. And it worked really, really well when I was a junior athlete. And like you said, going into 2010, the Youth Olympic Games, I was probably at that period of time, there was a sweet spot of like 12 to 18 months where I was probably the best junior kid in the world. But there was a lot of pressure because all of a sudden, people were starting to pick out who were going to be the faces of London 2012. Because I was really successful from a very young age, there was a lot of media attention around me. So all of a sudden, whenever I do a competition, there would be local press, media, journalists, and that's great, but it is a lot of pressure. And at that age, I was able to kind of handle it because you don't really think too much when you're 17 or 18. I'm sure you remember being 17, 18. There's like a real naivety of youth. You just kind of do. You don't really think. So that was an advantage to me. So I didn't really think too much. It was the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And my ambitions were like the very, very top. So luckily, when you're 17, there are so many levels and steps and people above you that you need to try and beat, that I just didn't have the time to stop and kind of really think about the magnitude of the pressure that was on my shoulders at that time. So yeah, I was able to just kind of handle it as a junior athlete, by focusing on the next thing and the next competition and then the next gymnast that I had to try and beat. And that was my way of dealing with it, I think. And also, I just kept it all inside my own head. Like I wouldn't share that with anybody. I don't think most 17-year-olds want to do that, we talk a lot about, it's really important to share how you're feeling, but 17, you probably don't want to do that. You're still trying to figure things out. So I think for me, my way of dealing with it was just get back in the gym, train, focus, keep working towards my goals.
And then 2012 rolls around, making the transition into senior gymnastics, straight in at the deep end. You're selected for the Olympics. Can you take us back to that moment where you had that phone call or that conversation? What were those emotions running through your body, realizing that you're going to then be an Olympian?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I think once I was that I've had both of those phone calls. I've had the you're in and you're out. And you're in one, you just kind of, you're waiting, you just want to hear, and it's pretty quick. You get told really early on in that conversation, you're going to go to the Olympic Games. I don't really remember the conversation after that. Again, I was just 19. I just wanted to ring my dad and tell him. Yeah, it very much, you're not taking it in. You're still not really processing what's going on. Feels like a whirlwind. You're right. I transitioned into a senior gymnast. Actually, at the age of 17, I started competing as a senior already. I was on like this perfect pathway, and everybody was steering me in that direction. So it almost in many ways felt like it was supposed to be this way. But it wasn't easy making that team. At the end of 2011, I went into the World Championships with a stress fracture in my collarbone. And in the competition, I tore my pec. So I was injured and had to have 8 weeks of no training. So I think December the 19th, 2011 was when I did my first press-ups on my collarbone. And then I had 6 months to make that team. And I left it right until the very last moment, produced one of the best performances of my life to get into that team. And it was just a lot of excitement. You're just young. You're not thinking about it. You're like a deer in the headlights. It was amazing. At that point in time, the way I was wired, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go to 4 Olympic Games. So this is just the first one. So that's a good mindset to have as a young athlete, because I think that helps keep you focused on the task at hand. I think if at your first Olympic Games at 19, you're thinking this is going to be the last one, you're then probably, you're probably getting your own way a little bit. And it was just the most mind-boggling experience. No one could have prepared me for that, because the Olympic Games is on such a big scale. It doesn't matter how many big gymnastics competitions you do, nothing will ever prepare you for an Olympic Games, particularly one in your own country. So I just went into it, and I was probably not very present with, people talk about being present all the time, don't they? I think I was just looking around, bright eyes, and kind of did my thing and did a good job, all things considered, at my first Olympic Games for 19. And it was just the most incredible experience.
And taking that first step into that arena then in London, as you say, home Olympics, were the feelings pretty similar to when you found out you're going to the Olympics, or did it suddenly dawn on you like, wow, this is where we're going to be competing?
Well, do you know what? Before we walked out, we were in the kind of in the hallway getting ready to go out, and Pixie Lott was performing. And when I was 19, I fancied her, so I was like, "Oh, this is amazing! Imagine if I could get to meet Pixie Lott. This will be incredible." So I wasn't even thinking about the gymnastics. I did really well on that first day. Normally in a qualification event at a gymnastics competition, there's no crowd. Normally there's nobody there, right? Because they can't sell the tickets and fill the seats. But because it was the Olympics, there was a lot of people there. And I remember from that qualification day just really enjoying it and doing very, very well. I hit all 5 of my routines. I very narrowly missed out on getting into the high bar final at 19. I think I finished as the second reserve in like 10th place. So I was just really, really happy. It wasn't then until the team final 2 days later when the realization, the pressure and the nerves like really got to me then. And that was a different kettle of fish, because all of a sudden we had an opportunity to try and win a medal. And I'd been the type of athlete from a very young age that like studied the sport. So I was obsessed with gymnastics. So all I used to do is like watch gymnastics on VHS tapes, like again and again and again. I wasn't very cool. Didn't have many friends outside of gymnastics. My life was just gymnastics. So I had a good inclination that we would be in with a shout of winning a medal. I found out since that the other team members felt the same way, but they just kept that to themselves and tried to kind of lower the temperature. Inside my head, I was freaking out, thinking, oh my gosh, we could win an Olympic medal. And I knew what that would mean, because we hadn't won one for 100 years. And, I remember watching the Olympic Games and there being nobody from Great Britain there, because we were the 23rd best team in the world. So I was doing everything but thinking about my performance. And going out to the Olympic team final, I was absolutely bricking it.
And then being in a squad alongside the likes of Lewis Smith, Christian Thomas, Max Whitlock, I do have a fourth name. Don't want to miss him out.
Daniel Purvis.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
What did you take away from their expertise, and especially someone like Lewis having competed in the Olympics in 2008 as well? What did you take away from him, and how he maybe dealt with things or handled that pressure?
Yeah, I mean, he was under an incredible amount of pressure. I think he was one of the faces of that Games, Lewis Smith. So he had maybe 10 sponsors at the time, all of the big sponsors that were supporting the Olympic Games and Team GB. So I remember actually after the qualification event, he hit his pommel horse routine. And the qualifying in many ways is the hardest, because if you don't qualify, you've not got a chance. So there's actually in many ways more pressure on that. And for him to make it to the pommel horse final was a big thing. So he actually broke down and got quite emotional after his pommel horse routine in the qualification. He was really good, Lewis, in that team final. We'd had an experience the year before at the World Championships where we really did very badly, and we finished 10th. And Lewis had tried to kind of get the team together and galvanize things. Now, he had the ability to do that because Lewis typically only competed on one apparatus. The rest of us guys were doing a lot of apparatus and a lot of gymnastics. So he had the mental energy to be able to kind of almost manage from within the team, like a player manager in some ways. And he was great at that, and he had the most experience. He'd been to an Olympic Games. None of the rest of us had. In that team, which is quite remarkable, there was only one person that had previously been at an Olympic Games. So we relied on that quite a lot. But we'd just been through a lot together. And like I said, that experience 12 months earlier in Tokyo where we completely basically messed the whole thing up and had 9 or 10 falls between us had been a real learning lesson. So that helped us handle that situation that we were in. But again, I look back now in hindsight and realize that Lewis and Christian, they were only 22. 22 is nothing. It's nothing. If you look at the Paris Olympic team or even the Tokyo Olympic team for the men's team, most of those guys were in their mid-20s, some of them in their late 20s, a couple in their early 20s. We had 2 teenagers in me and Max, and the other guys were only 21 and 22. What a young team. So we didn't really have that much experience. So to have handled that situation the way we did, I think is a credit to everybody on that team. But the senior guys certainly did. They were the backbone, Christian and Lewis in particular.
I just want to speak on the high bar quickly while we're here at the Olympics. Obviously, the high bar notoriously being your strongest event. Where did that strength of the event develop from?
You know, it's really funny. I tell this story in schools. I was petrified of the high bar when I was a kid. So I used to go and hide in the toilet. So when it was time to go on the high bar, because the high bar is 2.8 meters high. And when you're 7 years old and you're the smallest kid in your class, that's so high. I just couldn't get my head around how the other kids in my group were going on it. And it's made of steel. So you hit that bar, you lose your teeth. And so I used to go and hide in the toilet, and then I'd come back down and I was too small to see through the window in the top of the door. So I'd jump up to see if they were still on it. And I'd go back and hide. And I just kind of at one point figured out that I couldn't keep hiding in the toilet because someone would notice me eventually. And so I just kind of used to go and watch it and pretend to be chalking up my hands, procrastinating, but not actually going on it. And then I thought, well, next week I'll try and hang on the bar. I won't do anything. I'll just touch it. And that wasn't too scary. And then I chatted to some of the kids in my group and they told me that they were also petrified. And at that moment, I kind of figured out, right, they're scared too. I'm not on my own. Maybe if I can conquer this fear, that will give me an advantage over everybody else. And that's how I just built that bravery a little bit. But it's quite interesting. I became the first British man ever to win a high bar medal at a major championships. But I started off being somebody that was hiding in the toilet. And I think conquering that fear and getting over that on high bar was a big moment for me because then I became really fearless in gymnastics. And high bar is one of the apparatus where, it looks amazing whether it goes well or it goes wrong because it's just so dangerous. And it's split-second decisions, just a tiny bit of, if you're slightly too fast when you're going around the bar and doing your giants, which is where you go all the way around, if that's slightly off that timing, you've missed the bar. If it's slightly early, your face is on the bar. So it's such a crazy apparatus to do. It takes a certain personality to want to do the high bar. It's very high risk. and that just suited me down to a T. Once I'd gotten over that initial fear. So yeah, for me, the high bar, it was very much a story of perseverance. I wasn't amazing at it from a very young age, but I got much better at it as I got into my teenage years because I was just willing to take those risks and get over that fear barrier quicker than the other kids. And for me, I just love the high bar. It's like my favorite apparatus. Even to this day, I have my hand guards, which is what you put on your hands, in my rucksack. So at a lunchtime, if I go past the gym, I'll go in, put my guards on, and just swing on the bar because, yeah, it really is like my happy place, the high bar. But at the Olympic final in London 2012, I was effectively picked onto the team for high bar, and I fell in the team final. So 20,000 people went like that. And my brain was just going, oh my gosh, I've just cost Great Britain their first Olympic medal in 100 years. Thankfully, Christian Thomas went up and hit an amazing routine. It reminds me a bit of, I'm a Man United fan, so in the Champions League final when Ronaldo missed his penalty, it reminds me of that when we beat Chelsea. I remember him saying he was so thankful for Van der Sar for saving the penalty. And I felt that way about Christian. I was like, oh my gosh, it felt like he'd saved my life at that time. Because I just had these visions of everybody just hating me because I cost my country that medal. But I still managed to get up as a 19-year-old in that situation in front of 20,000 people, finished the routine really well. I got a good score. And we still managed to go on and win that medal. So, it was a crazy experience and something that was really difficult for me to compute as a 19-year-old because I spoke at the start of this conversation about my obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which means that I have a tendency to have quite binary thinking. So I couldn't compute that I'd won a medal, but I fell off. It didn't make sense to me in my head, and I felt like a bit of a fraud, like I didn't deserve that medal for a very long time afterwards. I look back now and I'm like, oh, wow, that's incredible that I managed to hold it together in that situation and still get a great score. But yeah, it was a massive learning experience, that whole London 2012 competition.
And now, as well as it being a learning experience, of course, now walking away from the Olympics with the team at bronze medal, as you say, the first Olympic men's gymnastics medal in 100 years, that must have filled you with an immense amount of pride walking away from that comp.
It certainly did. I had all my family there, and my family really were the backbone of me getting to the Olympic Games. Look, ultimately, I have to get on the bar. No one can do it for me. But in terms of doing everything they possibly could to give me the best possible chance, when I left home at 14, for the first 6 months, my mum would drive me there, and my 4-year-old little sister would wait for 7 hours while I trained, and then they'd drive me back an hour and 40 minutes back home from Huntingdon. So, like, the dedication and sacrifices and time, in many ways, I took that time away from my siblings. So I'll always be grateful for them for that. And they would probably say, yeah, but we got to travel the world and we had some amazing memories because of your gymnastics. But it was great to have them all there, albeit they were all spread out because they couldn't get seats together. Have them there in that stadium, it felt like our medal. But the thing I really remember was just how happy everybody was afterwards. So like everybody in the sport of gymnastics afterwards for months would be like, they'd like thank me. These were like coaches that never thought they'd ever see a British team win a medal. We were kind of just a team that just showed up to make up the numbers. So they just couldn't believe it. They were so excited. And I'll never kind of forget that. That felt really cool. Like we'd done something that was like really, really important for the sport. And it's still an achievement that hasn't been replicated since. We've not won another team medal. So, that just shows just how difficult it is, because I'd argue that the teams since then have been even better in many ways in terms of the ability and the talent in those teams. So to still be the only team that got that medal just shows how much of a special achievement that was.
No, absolutely. And were there any gymnasts that you watched on TV growing up competing at the Olympics that you've now either competed against, alongside, or they're now gymnasts and coaches that you've been trained by?
Yeah, well, one of my heroes as a kid was a German gymnast called Fabian Hambuchen. He was like the first rock star in gymnastics. So gymnastics is very traditional and everyone bows and is very quiet. This guy just came out and was just all personality, and that suited me because I came from football, right? So I'd score a goal and be celebrating, doing backflips and stuff. Whereas gymnastics is not like that at all. And I really liked that about him. So I used to love him as a kid. And I remember drawing a picture of him doing a release and catch element on the high bar from the Athens Olympic Games. I went on to compete alongside him, to beat him in some competitions, and to become good friends with him. I had the chance to interview him last year, actually. We went to his home gym. He gave us loads of his time. So that was a really cool moment. I competed with Kohei Uchimura, the greatest male gymnast of all time, in an all-around World Cup and at the World Championships and the Olympic Games, obviously, in London. He actually fell on the high bar in qualification, so I beat him on the high bar in London, so I'm proud of that. And then probably one of my proudest moments in gymnastics, I competed in the Tokyo World Cup Series in 2014 when I was 21, and I did my high bar routine, and when I came off, he gave me a nod and was like, as if to say, oh, that was a great routine. And I was like, wow, that's like the holy grail. Yeah, that's better than any medal or anything else. So, yeah, some amazing moments. When I was a kid growing up, I really was a student of the sport. So Alexei Nemov was my favorite gymnast of all time. He was a Russian gymnast that won gold in Sydney. I actually had a really amazing full circle moment just this week. So I interviewed the coach of Kohei Uchimura in the last chapter of his career. And as I started interviewing him, I was like, I really recognize this guy's face. And I put two and two together. So what happened was, when the Soviet Union broke up, many of the coaches from the Soviet Union spread across the world and took coaching positions all around the world and shared their knowledge. But they would all go back at Christmas to see their families. And so my coach Sergey went back one Christmas, and a guy called Nikolai Andrianov, who won 15 Olympic medals and had the record for most Olympic medals up until Michael Phelps beat him. He was training in Japan. He was coaching in Japan at the time, and he brought a VHS tape back to Russia, which then ended up in my hands as a 10-year-old kid. And there was a little boy in this video training that I watched and studied. And it turned out it was the guy I interviewed this week. And I was like, wow, that was one incredible full circle moment. 23 years later, I interviewed him. And so that was really cool. But yeah, I think for me, I've always been a student in the game. I love it. And I studied all the great gymnasts. And yeah, they were kind of my favorites, I'd say. I'd pick those three out.
I feel like gymnastics really has that full circle element, as you say. And one of those full circles, of course, being what you've now done outside of your gymnastics career after you retired. You've gone on to have the podcast, of course, where you speak to current gymnasts. You've gone on to work in schools to sort of inspire the next generation of gymnasts, more coaching, as you say. How important is that for you? Do you feel a certain duty to then go and inspire the next generation?
Yeah, maybe. I think more, I'm not going to pretend, though, that a lot of it isn't just because I love gymnastics and I want to stay in the sport. Gymnastics has become the vehicle in which I now operate. I do everything but the gymnastics now. So I talk about gymnastics, I coach gymnastics, I manage the gymnasts. I'm still trying in many ways, like most athletes that retire, to find an excuse to in some way come back. I don't want to compete in gymnastics because I physically can't do that, but this is kind of the next best thing. And I sat down at the end of my career and I said to myself, right, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years' time? And for me, it was all about having the opportunity to spend as much time with my family. And when I say family, I mainly mean my partner and my little boy, who's now 2 years old, as much time with him as I possibly can. I just want to give him my time. And I thought, how can I set up a life that gets me to that point in time? And can I do it by using gymnastics, the thing that I love? And I felt like that sounds quite greedy, but I think I can do it. And so I just set about set myself this goal, this 5-year plan. And, I'm very fortunate in that I've had a lot of support, a lot of smart people around me growing up, a lot of incredible experiences. And I've turned all of those into what I do now. And, I think of all of the work that I do, I personally feel like the school stuff is the most valuable, because I feel pretty strongly about the next generation and giving them the best opportunity to succeed. One thing that happens when you get towards the end of your career as an athlete is that you become that guy that says, oh, one day you're going to have to retire and you're going to get injured and you aren't going to be able... and you become quite negative and pessimistic. And, you know, a lot of people at the moment talk about the younger generation not having much work ethic or get up, and that's just not my experience at all. The kids want it. The kids don't want to be sat on their iPads. They want to be exposed to things. It's just that we're not giving them the opportunities to do that. And I have a real issue at the moment with taking those opportunities to be exposed to new things and try things in the real world physically being taken away. You know, in one breath, we have the government at the moment acknowledging that there's a real issue with childhood obesity and young people's mental health, but then we're taking away physical education, which is the easiest and most natural antidepressant that there is out there. So it's just very counterintuitive, and I'm quite passionate about sharing that message in schools, because when I was at school, the only person that came into my school were the police to do stranger danger, and they said, don't get in a white van. I never had if I had an Olympic athlete come into my school, that could have changed my life. That would have been the best day ever. So yeah, I just do my best to spread a really positive message and hopefully encourage young boys and girls to give it a go and try something new, even if it's not sport. Particularly with young girls, I've got two younger sisters, right? And I think what happens is that at secondary school, there's a massive dropout in women's sport. And then what happens is, quite often, their next experience of exercise is in a fitness gym, and the main driver is to aesthetically look a certain way. And that really upsets me quite a lot, because sport is so much more than that. And it's so good for your mental well-being, your social life. And I think guys maybe understand that a bit more, because they typically stay in sport throughout the whole of secondary school, and secondary school sport looks a lot like football, rugby, cricket, team sports. And so I think a lot of young men, without probably understanding it subconsciously, understand not just that sport is great for looking a certain way, but this is just really good for my life. Because what I noticed was that when I turned 18 and I started going out in town, I knew all of these people, but I knew them through football, not gymnastics, because I'd played football with them as a kid, and I'd gone to school and played against their schools. And I was like, whoa, what an amazing social thing this is. And now I'm retired. I play football with lads I played football with when I was a kid, which is so amazing. That's so good for my mental health. So yeah, I'm really passionate about that, particularly with young women. And I think gymnastics is a great sport for that, because it's one of the only sports that's dominated by women. It's really unique in that way. You know, a lot of sports are mainly watched or participated by men, right? Like, the men get the lion's share. Gymnastics is the flip and the reverse of that. So it's quite an interesting perspective to have. So yeah, I think the schoolwork for me is like the thing that I'm most passionate about and get the most value from. I think it does the most good.
No, absolutely. Great stuff. And now finally then, if you could share, and I will give you a minute to think about this if you do need it, but if you could share one message of inspiration or advice to any young and aspiring gymnasts or athletes out there, what would that be?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. I think it's just a message I share with kids at the end of my school assemblies that I do. When you're a young person, it's your job to try as many different things as possible, because everybody will be good at something. But if you don't try enough things, you might never find that thing that you're passionate about. And if you're passionate about something and you enjoy it, it's really easy to work hard at it. And if you work hard at things, normally you get good at them. And the world tends to like people that are good at things, right? So I think for me, it's trying as many different things as possible when you're young. You know, I'm in a very fortunate position now to, most of the time, my work doesn't really feel like it's work, you know, and I feel guilty about that a lot of the time. Like, I love what I do. Like, I wake up and I'm excited to go to work. I'm excited to do what I do. I don't think most people feel that way. I think it's the complete opposite. So I think when you're a kid, it's about trying as many different things as possible. It doesn't have to be sport. You know, you might be good at reading, writing, music, maths, building things, but trying to find and like selectively one by one crossing the things out that you don't like will get you closer to finding that thing that you're passionate about. You know, I'd imagine, Jess, that you found journalism and communicating and storytelling is like the thing that you love and you're passionate about, and you've combined that with sport, right? I
100%.
think if you can do that, you can find that. And that goes, honestly, that goes for everyone. That's not just young people, that goes for adults as well. And I always say that in my assemblies. I say every young person and adult in this room, because quite easily, I think the big fear for me would be to get to the end of my life and feel like I'd never enjoyed it and I'd just been living for the weekend. Like, I don't feel like that. Like, I appreciate every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as much as I do the weekends. I think I have a unique perspective in that because I got very unwell when I was 26. So I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and I became very suicidal. So for me, life just feels very much like a second chance. So I guess my starting point every day is I'm just really happy I'm alive. So that like gratitude and feeling very lucky just really helps me, particularly in the very difficult and challenging times that you'll have in your life. You know, life just is going to be hard. You've just got to figure out a way to move forward. And if you have two choices between being really positive and looking at the positives and being a glass half full, or being negative and always picking out the parts of your life that you don't like, it just seems like a really silly decision to pick the latter. So yeah, that's kind of like my approach. I try to be a positive force. I don't always get that right. I'm quite a pessimist by nature, so I have to surround myself with a lot of positive people. But I think that message is the big one. And if there is anybody out there, particularly right now, right, because we're in a situation where the economy is kind of all up in the air. Everybody's very divided. Everything's very divisive. You know, I don't watch the news anymore because you turn it on and you just feel like the world's burning. You walk outside and you're like, oh, things aren't that bad, actually. I think my biggest advice for anybody that's struggling there is, and I found this, and it's a little bit of a framework, and I was lucky that I had a safety net that picked me up, but not everybody's got that, is to really focus on making sure that you're communicating with people around you, make sure you're eating properly, make sure you're exercising, and make sure you're sleeping. Sounds really basic, but if you're like feeling pretty depressed and down and low, if you check those things, and the anagram I use is seek, as in seek help. Am I sleeping properly? Am I exercising? Am I eating? And am I communicating? And not more often than not, when I feel down, one of those things I could improve on. And if you're doing all of those things and you still feel that way, then maybe it's time to reach out and get some professional help. But I think that's an important message right now, because I think a lot of young people and just a lot of people in general are struggling mentally, and they're finding things quite hard. And the financial strain is difficult, and the world seems like it's complete chaos. I just think focusing on those things is the best kind of framework I've found in the years since my depression and anxiety to handle life.
Well, that's excellent and very, very insightful piece of advice there. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been great to hear about your experience, and thank you again for joining us, and all the best for what's next.
Thank you very much, Jess. Likewise, I wish you all the best for the rest of this year.
Thank you very much.